Hey, this is Bill Donahue from GENEDGE, and we're pleased to offer to our MEP partners, as well as a number of, I believe, manufacturers and distributors who are also on this call today, a opportunity to learn more about medical devices during the pandemic. We've got some folks who are some absolute experts in the field who are going to be taking you through this primer today. Darren Reeves from DP Distribution and Consulting, who's been a longtime partner of GENEDGE's for over 20 years, is our FDA medical device and instrument consultant, and he's going to be the horsepower that we have for you all today. Aimee McCarthy is kind of running triage for GENEDGE. She and Darren have worked together for many years. She's based out of our Richmond Metro office and is what we call a regional growth manager, and is helping to move this information forward to folks as rapidly as possible as they identify opportunities to, for people to actually have an opportunity to bring forward products and services that can help in the pandemic. So I'm going to hand it off to Aimee and Darren, and thank you for joining us today. This is being recorded so that you can utilize this in the future as you so desire. Thanks, folks.
Hey, just real quick. So Darren, just to give a quick bio, has a pretty extensive background, biology and business, and was a manufacturing manager for a medical company, as well as ran a sterilization facility. And he's been consulting in the area of medical devices and medical instruments for 20 years. So Darren, you got it.
Sounds good. Appreciate everybody coming in and listening to what we've got to say. We're going to go through this fairly quickly. Again, my name is Darren Reeves. Write down that contact information as well as Aimee's, so that if you have any questions afterwards, we can answer any questions that you may have. I'm going to try to go through this in about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer after that. I'm actually in Richmond, Virginia. As Bill said, I've worked with the Virginia MEP GENEDGE for around 20 years. I've been in this industry for 30 years plus. So worked with the FDA on many, many occasions. And so I'm going to put this thing together. I'm not going to spend too much time on the disclaimer. I am not with the FDA. I have worked with the FDA for many, many years, ever since I pretty much have been in the medical industry. Everything that you see in this presentation is our current understanding. And I've been trying to get in touch with the FDA and haven't been in touch with them on several of these topics, and it's still fluid on some of the other ones. So I will present to you what information I currently have. The agenda, we're going to talk about some of the main topics of concern with the pandemic, talk about the medical device classes, what is PPE, what are the difference in the types of devices that you're hearing about. We'll discuss a little bit about the emergency use authorizations, what kind of factory requirements there will be during this time. And another little thing that's interesting, we'll talk about FDA approval, and hand sanitizer / alcohol used for the hand sanitizer is a current topic, and then anything else that we come up with. Again, I'm gonna try to make this in 30 minutes, so I will speak kind of quickly. If you have any questions, please note the slide number at the bottom. And then at the end of the 30 minutes, we will open it up for question and answer. I'm going to try to keep that to 30 minutes if we can, but I do not have a hard stop due to this issue. I want to make sure you get your questions answered. If you have a question during that question and answer session that I know is going to take longer than just a few minutes, I may just say, call me. So please, again, write down that phone number so we can get a hold of each other afterwards. Okay, so the types of devices, there are all kinds of medical devices out there, as you guys know. Specifically, we're going to focus on the PPE, the things that everybody's concerned about, these types of things that we've got listed on here. There's a bunch of different terms out there. I want to make sure everybody's familiar with what those terms really mean and what people are talking about when they're throwing the words out. All right, so the FDA breaks down all medical devices into 3 classes based on risk. And they're real they come up with these real good names, the class 1, class 2s, and class 3. and the class 1 is the lowest risk, class 3 highest risk. And amount of oversight that the FDA has on those devices will tell you it was based on the class. So the next slide I've got here really says, okay, if you've got a class 1 device, which we'll go over what those are in a minute, there's really no FDA oversight on those devices. We can get those into the market and we can help customers get those into the market almost immediately. We will have some facility concerns, but we can pretty much get those on the market very quickly. Class 3s, on the other hand, those require what we call a pre-market approval, and those cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get in place. They're life-sustaining devices. You probably will not deal with that. Now you could deal with it in the future after this thing is over with, but just know that they exist. A lot of the problem child that we'll have with this issue will be the class 2 devices. They require something called a 510K approval from the FDA. That is something that we will submit information to the FDA in order to show that our product is as safe and effective as something that's already on the market. So PPE, you hear a lot of that being tossed around. What is the PPE? It stands for personal protective equipment. You'll hear most everybody will say PPE. It's basically the gloves and the gowns and the head covers and the shoe covers and all that sort of thing. And it's to protect people from any kind of hazards. In our industry, specifically biological hazards. So it's a very common term in the industry. With respect to this pandemic, we're really talking about masks, face shields, gowns, gloves, coveralls. All those things are the PPE that we're referring to. Let's talk about some of the differences in what we've got. With masks, there are really 2 different types of masks with respect to the FDA. There are also other protective masks that you find in Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that, but they should not be for medical purposes. They should be marketed specifically for, let's say, dust protection or something like that. The first one, and the one that is actually the most coveted mask, is what we call the N95 respirator mask. That is a class 2 if it was a surgical mask. Now, what the FDA has done, they got together with the CDC and they put these under what we call an emergency use authorization. So no matter what intended use that mask has right now, you can put them on the market immediately, okay? So these are the coveted N95 respirators. They're also called respirators. Do not get a respirator and a ventilator mixed up. In the olden days, a ventilator was sometimes called a respirator, so people still do use those terms interchangeable. But a ventilator is that big piece of equipment that they're looking for and saying that we're have a shortage of. And the N95/respirator is what's pictured on here. It's got that little filter in the middle of it, okay? So those can be put onto the market almost immediately. The secondary type of mask is what we call, well, let me go back into the N95. The N, basically, it means NIOSH. It's the organization that put out the test methods for those masks. You may also see a KN95, which is a European equivalent. Those can also be put onto the market. Okay, so those are being brought in now. And the 95 means it filters out 95% of the airborne particulates. Those particular masks are designed to protect the user, not the patient. Okay, the second type of mask is really what we call a surgical mask, and some of this stuff is gray. Most masks, if they're for any medical claim, are going to fall into this category. Some have the ear loops like you see at the bottom left, and some have the ties. A lot of people will say that the ties are for surgical use and that the ear loops are for regular patient procedure type of activities, and that's kind of how they use them. But the FDA has tied them all together in some of their guidance documents. Some people today are playing the gray, and they're not even calling it for medical purposes anyway. But if you make a mask and you sell it to a hospital, you pretty much know what they're using it for. So it's a gray animal. We have to go on a case-by-case basis as to whether they're coming from out of the country or whether they're making them in the U.S. Sometimes right now, pretty much anyone who's making these masks in the U.S. are able to sell them, but we can't get them into the country at this point from other countries. All right, so all of these right now that you've got on the screen here are class 1 devices and can be sold almost immediately. Head covers, shoe covers, scrub shirts, scrub pants, coveralls, patient gowns. Now, the patient gowns are not surgical gowns. The surgical gowns that you use in these in the OR are a class 2 device and cannot be sold at this point, but patient gowns can. And also there's a difference between patient exam gloves and surgical gloves. Okay, so make sure that you understand the difference. If you have a customer or client that wants to sell something, whatever it is, today and in the future, what we can do is go into the FDA's database and immediately find out how they classify that device and what kind of regulatory control they have over it. I want to make one other little caveat here. Almost everything I'm telling you has some sort of an exception to it. There are some very small group of class 1s that do require a 510K FDA approval. There are some class 2s, actually quite a bit of class 2s now, that do not have or require a 510K because they've been given what they call, the FDA is not enforcing the requirements for the devices. So we can help you figure out what your client needs with respect to that with a quick phone call or email. Okay. Again, they require, okay, they are regulated by the FDA, and they're usually the sterile products. So some people will sell them non-sterile to kit packers, but if you have those issues, you can contact us so we can help you. Patient exam gloves are usually the ones that you see in the little boxes when you go into your doctor's office and they pull them out and use them during the exam. Again, some of these issues are very gray. That's where expertise comes in to go through and help you learn where the FDA's thought process is. Sometimes they put guidance documents out for different devices. There's a lot of those issues out there that we can help you with if you have specific questions. We can get into all of that during this presentation. There is something called an emergency use authorization, and that is where obviously during this type of event, one organization goes to another and says, can we use these things? From a medical device standpoint, the N95 industrial masks are in fact under the EUA, as well as those test kits that everybody's listening to or hearing about. A lot of those test kits are under EUA in order to get those onto the market very quickly. So those are the types of things that have been going on. We're hoping that some other devices will get onto that list or get into a EUA situation, and I will keep people posted as through the MEPs as those come out. Okay, factory requirements. We know that this is not normal times. Typically and normally, every company that makes a medical product must follow the good manufacturing practices, the GMPs. The GMPs for medical devices are called the Quality System Regulation. It's a QSR. We are not in normal times. So one of the things that we've seen and can help is if is ISO 13485 or ISO 9001 certified. Those are very, very close to the GMPs for medical devices. Matter of fact, they both, ISO 9001 was the predecessor to the current GMP for medical devices. So what we need to do and address is find out whether the customer wants to be doing this short term or whether they want to continue doing it after the pandemic is over. If they're doing it short term, what I have seen done in the past was similar, not this type of situation, but similar localized situations, is we can put in a quality plan or some sort of plan saying what we're doing to implementing things and go ahead and make and distribute those products as we're in the process of moving forward. Put in basic controls and we can move from there. It just depends on the organization and what they currently have in place. Okay, so usually we can also work under template SOPs so that we do have a system in place minimally and move forward to try to help with the pandemic situation. Be very, very careful. The FDA does not approve devices unless it is a class 3 device, and then they will come in and actually approve the device and the facility, and the company cannot change anything after that. So the FDA will not say your device is approved. They will. The 510K is a type of marketing approval, which gives the company the ability to market that device but it's not an FDA approval of the device itself. And the FDA does not, they do not approve your facility either. So when somebody says I have an FDA approved facility, most likely it's just that it's registered. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. So for class 1 devices, you're supposed to have the QSR procedures involved in place. And the company is supposed to register that facility. I'm checking on it now. I'm seeing a lot of companies just go ahead and it depends on whether you're going to go for short-term or long-term manufacturing. The cost to actually register your facility right now is a little over $5,000 for 2020, and it just continually goes up a little each year. So what we would need to do is see, does this company want to actually make the products for the long term, or they're just doing it to help out the organization? I do have a question, that exact question into the FDA now, trying to figure out, okay, if we're just going to do this for the next 3 months, do we need to register the facility? I'm seeing it not being done, and I'm seeing them not enforce it at this point. I can't definitively say that on behalf of the FDA, but that's what I'm saying. Okay. And we can help register any organization out there that they want to start doing it long term. So that's for class 1s. Class 2s, basically the same as class 1, but we need to get a 510K normally, which means we find something that's already on the market, and we do the testing that's required to demonstrate that our product is on the market. I mean, is as safe and effective as that, what we call predicate. And what we're doing now is we're doing it simultaneously, and we're seeing that it's being accepted by the FDA. We're actually submitting that paperwork and the testing. Once we've got the testing, I've got several clients now that are marketing those products in order to help the pandemic, and I'm not seeing any pushback from the FDA yet. And for example, want to also make you guys clear, the ventilators that they're talking about, the equipment that GE is making now, they are a class 2. They are not a class 3. Okay, so the class 3s are more along the lines of an artificial heart valve or something that's going to keep the patient alive. If it were to fail, it's definitely going to harm the patient adversely, in other words, kill them. Okay, so those ventilators are class 2. Class 3s, again, life-sustaining, probably won't deal with these. You will need a PMA, which is the only approval the FDA has. If you ever get into that, then you're going to need additional support. One unique item is that hand sanitizer and the alcohol that goes into the hand sanitizer. The FDA has written guidance documents for both of those, allowing for enforcement discretion under very strict guidance. Okay, so we're seeing now that a lot of the breweries, distilleries, and those types of things are trying to jump in to help offset their businesses and also help the pandemic issue, and starting to try to make the hand sanitizer in their equipment because they're very well capable of doing it. Here's the 2 documents that are written for those on the very guidelines on the hand sanitizer, and they have very specific guidelines on how to allow the manufacturing of the alcohol, but they are using enforcement discretion, which means they will not go in and adversely affect any business that's following these guidelines. If you do make the alcohol, they are asking that you register with the FDA just so that they know that you're doing it, but they have no intent of going into and auditing your facilities. Okay, as we said, things are changing daily. There may even be something in this new bill that just passed on the ability to manufacture face masks. As we get additional information, we will pass this out to the MEP and get that information out to you guys. I know that was very quick. We can help you as this thing blows over, because it will blow over. In our opinion, though, the medical device industry is going to change. There'll be a lot additional PPE that will be stockpiled. There'll be a lot more PPE probably housed in hospitals. I think that the amount of devices that are going to be used will actually grow now and in the future. So anything we can do to help support you, we will. And again, I know that was quick. I talk fast anyway, but if you have any questions, I would like to open it up. I don't know if Kelly, if you do that, and see what we can do to help you guys if you have any specific issues.
So this is Amy Lee from Florida Makes. I do have one question. I know, Darren, that you said that you have a question into the FDA asking about, temporary registration or if what's required, because we are checking with different manufacturers to see if they're able to maybe pivot or shift and make something else. For example, hand sanitizer. They may not currently make it, but they may have the capability to make it. So when do you expect an answer on that? And how can we get updates from you?
Hey, Amy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was muted too. All right. To use your example of hand sanitizer, there is no requirement for anything other than they do have to register, but there's no payment for that, and you don't have to wait for anything back from them. So specifically to the hand sanitizer, that's a very quick and easy, simple process. It's purely documentation. From the medical device side, I put the request in earlier this week.
You're
Got the automated response back. Oh, did you hear the part about the hand sanitizer?
Yes, yep, I did. You referred to other medical devices?
Yeah, for other medical devices, I put the request into the FDA earlier this week and got the automated response. So what I'm seeing is companies are manufacturing the product, they're documenting why they feel safe and effective, and if they're only going to do it short term, I personally don't believe there's going to be any repercussions. There's also been a liability or document that's been sent out, and I forget who sent that out, but minimizing the liability during the pandemic. I'll have to find that and get that to Bill. If any information that I do find, I will give that to the Virginia MEP, to Bill, and I'm assuming he will send that out to the group on here. Bill, is that true? He's probably muted. I'm going to speak.
This is Amy. We can work that out through Kelly, I think.
Great.
Thank you.
And Darren, is the reason we don't have to pay a fee to register is because they have the enforcement discretion classification for hand sanitizers and alcohol, and those are the only two currently classified in that subset, correct?
That is correct. Now, if you're making hand sanitizer, you do not have to register. You only have to register if you're making the alcohol for the hand sanitizer.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is Carrie Schoenig from the Great Lakes Trade Adjustment Assistance Center at the University of Michigan. I am curious about the registration that you mentioned, the $5,236. How long does that take to actually get registered?
I'm just hesitating here because you really don't have to wait at all. You pay your money and you're registered, and it's good for 1 year. They go from October to October. And technically, you don't have to register until after you've sold, until 30 days after you've sold your first product.
Huh,
So
okay.
manufacturers can go ahead and manufacture the stuff. If they're even going to do it long term, they can go ahead and start manufacturing, and then we can get the ball rolling on the registration.
Hey, Darren, this is Bill. Is that an online registration?
It is. That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you too.
This is Stacy Harris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We are changing our manufacturing operation to make face shields. Is there anything we need to do specially in doing so?
Stacy, are you going to make those long-term or short-term?
Short-term.
Short-term, there's really nothing you need to do. I would put in a quality, let me back up. Your manufacturing currently, are you ISO 9001 or 13485?
No.
Okay.
We
Do
currently
you work on,
we currently actually make magnets and souvenirs and ornaments, but we are suited up and capable of making face shields.
okay, so the face shields are actually a class 1 device. I would go ahead and document a rationale as to why they're safe and effective, and what, if you have any specification, document the specifications, and I would start manufacturing and selling those, and I would probably wait about 2 weeks to see if there's any additional information on the registration. because nobody's going to enforce registration at this point if you're going to do it short term for a class 1 device. But we do need to have our due diligence in place. I think there's going to be more information out in the next week or so, and you don't legally have to register your facility until 30 days after you sell the first device anyway.
Got it.
Thank you very much.
Yep. What other questions do we have out there?
And this is Barbara Williams from NCMEP. On slide 20, you talked about ISO 13485 and ISO 9001. And if companies are not certified to either one of those standards right now, what did you say after that?
There are two things we have to address. We have to address the FDA approval of the device itself, or the marketing approval of the device itself. We also have to be concerned about the manufacturing conditions, whether we have procedures in place. If you're not compliant with the QSRs, which a lot of these companies will not be, the next question that we ask is, are you 9001 or 13485 certified? Because those will simulate the same conditions. If not, there are a list of procedures that should be in place, and the company should document a plan to put those procedures in place over the next, let's say, 2 weeks, even if they're just template procedures. And we can help the organizations put those together. And Bill, what I will probably do, and what I think I should do, is create that list of procedures that have to be in place so that you can disseminate that to the group so they know what kind of things that they're looking for. And these don't need to be real extensive procedures for a low risk device. They can be very, very simple, and then we will be compliant with the FDA, which is all you need at this point.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Hello, Darren. This is James Smith from GENEDGE. Exactly what services are you providing for MEP centers?
Right now, I am providing consulting on these basic questions that pretty much all of the MEPs are having. If you've got larger existing projects, we would literally go through and support you with different contracts on pretty much any medical device issues you've got. I would think during this time, you're going to have your basic questions of how do we get this thing to sell tomorrow? And then what do we do long-term? What procedures do we need to have in place? And then it could be anything from helping to actually implement those procedures to training of the organizations. I'm a senior subject matter expert for a large training organization as well. We do all kinds of, we do 510K support. We do pretty much any medical device issue that you've got that we can handle. But right now, through the Virginia MEP, we're helping with the basic stuff like, okay, what classification is this device? Can we do this? Can we do that? What is the agency's take on this particular question to be able to support those basic questions? Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Darren, this is Steve Holcomb from GENEDGE.
Hey, Steve.
Hi. A question about 501K approval. You've talked about it in several places. Could you talk a little bit about the devices that require the 501K approval? I think they're class 2. And
Sure, yeah.
what the length of that approval process and the cost is?
The cost, if you're a small business, you can actually do a small business. I just did it yesterday. It's around $2,500 to send it in. What it is it is a 510K, is a section of an act back in the Safe Medical Devices Act of 1976. And it basically said that you find a device that is equivalent to your device and is substantially equivalent. And then you demonstrate that your device is as safe and as effective as that what we call predicate that's already on the market. Basically, the 510Ks are required for Me Too devices, things that are a little higher risk than just I'll say a patient glove or a shoe cover, things that are the types of would surgical mask, be a surgical gown, a syringe, a needle, a catheters, not all, but certain types of catheters. These types of things, the FDA feels that they need a certain amount of oversight to ensure the safety and efficacy of that product. That being said, it's different than how they do it in Europe, which, by the way, we support that as well. In Europe, you have a classification, I'll say, document that you go through and you answer a bunch of questions to determine what the class of that device is. In the US, you actually go straight to the FDA's database, and they have generically classified many different devices. And you go there, you type in what your device is or a generic category, and it will pop up and it will tell you if it's class 1, 2, or 3. There is a fourth class that's kind of not a class. It's called unclassified, and that's based on the intended use of the device, what you claim it's going to do. That usually requires a 510K as well. And there's a lot of guidance documents out there. For example, there's a guidance document on the testing that needs to be done to submit a 510K for a surgical mask. And there's a lot of other guidance documents out there as well. There's actually some different types of 510Ks. There's a traditional, there's an abbreviated, there's several different types of 510Ks that you can use. The FDA, once you submit that data into the FDA and pay your fee, they're supposed to turn it around in 90 days. Up until the pandemic, we were getting turned around actually within about 30. I do not know what that turnaround time is going to be right now. We're submitting several of them in the next week or so, and we're going to find out what that turnaround time is going to be. I'm anticipating that for the PPE that requires a 510K, they're going to turn it around fairly quickly. I don't see it being under 2 weeks. It could be under 30 days though.
Okay, thanks, Darren. It sounds like most of the kind of things that our clients would want to do would fall into the class 1 category.
I think so, yeah. Most of the PPE is really the 510K. The other thing that people are doing, and I can't recommend this, but as I said, there's 2 different types of those N95 respirators. One is literally a surgical N95. The other one is a commercial N95. And that EUA that I was talking about, it's the same mask. It has to do the same. So the reason why the CDC got that EUA, Emergency Use Authorization, through so quickly was because they're exactly the same mask. They have to test the same way. A mask that you see at Walmart may not be the same as a surgical mask. And quite honestly, in the industry, in the medical industry, it's really gray because some people will call it a procedure mask with the loops, and they'll call the surgical mask with the ties, because the purpose of those masks, most people don't know, is not to protect the user, is to protect the patient, because they've got gaps around the cheek, whereas the N95s are a much tighter fitting mask. Those are designed to protect the user. So a lot of people, a lot of the masks that you'll see at the Home Depots of the world are considered protection masks and don't have any claims, or not supposed to have any claims of a medical nature. Therefore, they're completely outside of the control of the FDA. So and even in our industry, the FDA says in their actual regulation that they only require a 510K for surgical masks, but there's a guidance document out there that lumps procedure masks into the surgical mask. So it's kind of gray, and I would suggest we talk on a topic by topic basis if you've got customers who are going to do that.
Darren, this is Barbara Williams again. You mentioned the FDA database. Is that a database that's accessible to everybody, or?
It is. It is. You go to www.fda.gov. Don't go to .com. They'll try to sell you something. Okay, go to www.fda.gov. Then you'll see the different tabs that of the industries that the FDA regulates. You'll see pharma, you'll see food, you'll see medical devices. Click on the tab and you'll see on that one something called device advice. They actually have a fairly simple website to follow into certain issues, and one of them will say how to market your device. And when you go to how to market your device, it will go into a couple tabs. One of them will be device classification. You can go in there and search the classes. Great question.
Can you, I joined late. I'm Terry Collins from Connecticut. Could you tell me how to get a copy of these slides?
Hi, Terry. This is Kelly Buchanan. We will be posting this whole webinar recording on MEP University at the conclusion of the call.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And Darren,
Kelly,
you talked
why
about
don't you
the
scroll up to the top of the questions and see
Yes.
which ones we've captured? Because they
Actually-
scroll pretty fast for Darren's eyes to catch them while he's talking.
Okay, actually, I'm going to share my screen. I've been copying them, and they're in a Word document.
Nice.
So you just look at them real quick. Darren, are you good with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, 1 second. So there are the questions that were from chat. So Darren, I'll let you take it away.
Holy cow, where do those questions come from?
So Darren, one more question from James Smith out of Virginia. What about if somebody's making component parts for like a ventilator? Do they have to
Great
be
question.
classified?
Great question. The components themselves are not regulated. What you will have to do is get with the OEM, the end user, and you will have to get them to accept and put the component into their supplier evaluation program. So you will not have to do anything for, if you're making for a particular end user, you can do that. If you're just making them for sale, that's fine. That's their responsibility, not yours. Okay, let's walk through some of these questions. We got hand sanitizer. What if you're making the glycerin portion? Glycerin is not an API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, so you're fine there. You don't have to do anything. You can make it. There are some companies that would like to participate in the PPE chain. I had to get started. Exactly what services Darren offered. Okay, I think I answered that earlier. We get into all of the manufacturing with the support, obviously, of the MEPs. And the quality regulatory aspects of the medical devices. As far as getting into the supply chain and selling them, that's a different issue. We don't handle that part at this point. Let's see, list of websites. Is there a list or website that breaks everything down into? There is that website that I was just talking to. But it's a searchable website. You've got to put in the generic class of the device in order to find out what class it is. And that's exactly how you do it. There's another page in that FDA website that I was talking about. Again, fda.gov, and go to the devices tab. And that's where you will find the different classes. If somebody needs me to walk you through that, feel free to either call me or email me. We can set up a time and I can walk you through it real quick.
And Darren, the classes are the 3 alphabetic identifiers like OXZ and FYI?
Good question. No, the classes are literally class 1, class 2, class 3. The FDA code are the 3 alpha characters that you're talking about. So every generic medical device type has its own FDA code, and that's what the FDA uses to categorize events that happen. So if there's a recall on a surgical mask, the surgical mask code is FXX. And so anything happens with a surgical mask, they'll code it by that 3-letter code. And then also one of the things that you use to determine the definition of a particular medical device? Great question.
Thank you.
What about home sews, making masks? We got a lot of that going on right now. There's nobody that approves that right now. What I'm seeing is that once the president made the state of emergency, he gave the governors and the states the right to get PPE wherever they wanted to get it. So you've got a lot of these people now that are making masks, and if the hospitals are willing to take them, they'll take them. I'm actually seeing that there's a lot of hospitals now that won't take a lot of these things. You're seeing all the kinds of stuff out there with, nurses wearing trash bags and all of the stuff that's sensationalized out there. I think they're concerned about liability. You can imagine what would happen if one of the healthcare providers wearing a home sewn mask actually catches the virus and something happens. There's going to be an issue. So at this point, let me see. I've heard some medical professionals are putting over N95. Okay, there's a difference between what the healthcare professionals do and what the industry can market. Medical professionals are practicing medicine. Manufacturers are selling a product. So you can't really, I can't talk to say it's okay to have home sewn masks and market it to a professional. Now, if a hospital comes to a company and says, I want you to make these for me, there's a different kind of rule going on there, because that company then becomes an extension of that hospital, and they're doing it under the direction of clinicians. It kind of gets gray again. So if you've got any specific issues like that, I've seen things where a hospital needed something in particular made, they go to a manufacturer, and that manufacturer can do things outside of the FDA guidance, because the FDA is a federal, they regulate interstate commerce, and this would be an intrastate issue at the direction of a hospital. I don't know if that answers that question. Hope it does. It'd be on a case-by-case basis. That's number 4. Number 5, talk a little more about the 510K approval. I think I just did that. I think I answered that. Like I said, if you're a small business, it costs you have to actually submit a small business application. It's under 30 million in sales. And if you're not a small business, then I think it's around $11,000 to submit it. It's supposed to take, the FDA has 90 days to submit it. And there's all kinds of different 510K methods of getting that documentation together depending on what the device is. Number 6, so is face mask class 1, and do you need to get registered? Also hand sanitizer. Good question. Face mask is a gray animal. It is being regulated per guidance document as a class 2, but in the regulation itself, it says it's only, class 2 designation is only to surgical masks. Okay, so again, that would be a case-by-case basis. How are they marketing it now? Are they marketing it interstate commerce? And do they need to register? Are they going to make it short-term or long-term? Long-term, definitely need to register the facility. Short-term, again, I would think I would wait for another couple of weeks to see if we get any further clarification from the agency during the pandemic. And also hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is not a medical device. It is actually considered a pharmaceutical. And if you're making the hand sanitizer itself, no, you do not need to register with the FDA. You do need to follow the guidance document that I put on one of the slides that's on here. Go to that guidance document. It tells you the exact chemical formulation that you need to put together. And as long as you do that, you don't need to involve the FDA at all. If you're making the alcohol that goes into the hand sanitizer, you do need to register your facility with the FDA. It is a simple online process, does not cost anything, and they will not come out to your facility. They simply want to know what you're doing. Okay, that's number 6. Number 7, are the QMS compliances needed for class 1 devices? Yes. There is one section in the regulations called design controls. For a class 1 device, you do not need design controls. It takes a big portion of the quality and regulatory issues away, but type 1 or class 1 devices do need the quality management system procedures in place as well. And again, I'm saying that as long as we're doing it simultaneous, we write a plan that says this is what we're doing, this is the time frame, that people are able to put in the main procedures first and then put in the rest of them as you go along. And I've also seen people put in really basic template types of systems to get compliant. How can we get copies of those templates? Again, get with Aimee and let's see what you're doing, what we need, and we can maybe make those available. Is the FDA fee required for all 3 classes? Yes, it is. So if you do have to register, then the fee will be the same. And the fees are the same for all companies, small and large, class 1, class 2, and class 3s. I heard surgical masks, surgical gowns, syringe, catheters, for example, 453K, or class 1. Those categories that are on this page on number 10 do require 510K. Yes, that is correct. Those are all class 2s. Man, we went through a lot there. What else we got?
Darren, can you show the guidance doc info again?
There you go. Okay. So the first one, the policy for temporary compounding of certain sanitizers, that's the one that has the formula for the sanitizer in it. If the company is just making the hand sanitizers, there's some very specific guidelines in that document. And as long as the company is following that document, they're fine. And it's kind of, I say very specific. The formula for the sanitizer is very specific. There's a couple little vague things in there, like you got to be manufactured in a clean facility. Then it becomes up to the customer to define what that means. If you're manufacturing under an FDA or food environment, that's perfectly fine. Those practices would meet those requirements. And then the second document, the temporary policy for manufacture of alcohol, again, very specific details on what you need to do, and even the labeling of both the hand sanitizer and the alcohol are in those guidance documents. So you don't even have to come up with a label.
Darren, this is Steve Holcomb. Somebody just asked in a chat message where these documents are located that are shown on this page.
Just Google them, write down the name and Google it. They're actually on the FDA's website, but Google it, just that, it'll pop up.
They're
Thank you.
PDFs, right, Darren?
They are.
One thing that we can do also, I'm scrolling down through these questions, where we were talking about the, let me find this, the FDA.gov, and Darren was, you cut out occasionally, Darren, but he was talking about the different tabs at the top. We could probably do a few screenshots of that with some explanations and send that to you.
And Aimee, if you want to send those PDFs to me, I would be happy to post on MEPU too, along with the recording.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I think I have them.
If you don't, Aimee, just let me know. I can send them.
Yeah. I think we sent them, yeah, to yesterday. So can we do screenshots and maybe have a couple examples of how you get to the various classifications, those three-digit classifications?
Yeah, I can put that together.
Thanks.
Aimee, this is Steve Holcomb again. If this has been recorded and we're going to put it out there for people to rewatch, I wonder if it'd be too much work to ask Darren to re-record this thing in a way that he didn't have all those glitches where we lost the audio, and have a nice clean voice recording of this with no audience involved, so that when people replayed it, they'd get the whole thing.
We can talk about that.
I don't know how to do it, but I'll be more happy to give it a shot.
Darren, this is Robert Crew in North Carolina. I spent 25 years with the FDA portion of pharmaceuticals, so I appreciate you knocking through the mystique of medical devices and giving all of us a little bit more comfort and understanding. Would it be possible to have a question and answer document set up so that after 2 weeks of us going out there and talking to clients and getting more questions, we could consolidate the questions to help everybody out?
I think that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, I can work with Darren on that. That's an awesome idea.
Thank you.
Darren, this is Jason Clark from the Georgia MEP. I have a question. You were talking about putting together a list of those procedures for companies who don't have documentation or not 9001 or 13485 certified. Is that something that's listed somewhere already, or are you going to need to put that list together?
I've got pretty much a list together pretty good, so I can get that out quickly.
Excellent.
I can kind of coordinate with him too, so that we sort of keep track of who those go to and whatnot. My guess is if you get clients that you provide documents like that to, you can probably get a client served, because that's valuable information. So you could do a no-cost proposal or something like that.
Absolutely. I've got a client right now who, to be honest, he actually went out just as a business owner, went out and tried to buy 1.5 million masks at $2.50 a piece to get out to medical professionals, and was outbid by a brokerage from Italy. So he's taking his entire company and pivoting from what he's doing now to making masks. He's literally doesn't even care if he makes a penny on it, as long as he doesn't lose money. So he's just trying to get up and make an N95s or something equivalent as quickly as possible. And I can tell you, he's already been on the news in a few places nationally, and is trying to move very, very quickly.
Great. Well, we can help with that too.
And Darren, this is Kelly. I've popped up another question on the screen for you to answer.
Okay, that's a great question. Again, as I said earlier, in the device industry, we have to register our facilities, which tell you what, or tells the FDA that we're here. That's all it is. When somebody says we've got an FDA approved facility, 99 times out of 100, that's not true. They literally have just registered their facility, and that's it. Once we register the facility, we then have to list the device per that FDA code. Masks are gray. There's a FDA code for masks, but it's for surgical masks. And it says it's only class 2 if they're surgical masks. So by regulation, that's all there is, but which means that there really is a class 1, I'll say, procedure mask, which would not fall under that. It would be under a different code. A lot of people in the medical device industry will sell a ear loop procedure mask as a class 1 device. They code it differently and they sell it that way. There is a guidance document by the FDA that talks to getting a 510K for a mask. It says for surgical masks. And in that guidance document, which is very old actually, they actually include the words procedure masks in that guidance document, which leads somebody to believe that, per FDA thinking at the time, that all masks require a 510K. So there are people out there now, which I believe would be the appropriate thing to do. I can't tell people that they can do it because, well, yeah, I can too, because in the regulation, it says that only surgical masks are class 2s. It doesn't say only, but it says surgical mask. So if you register your facility and have a non-tie mask, an ear loop mask, and you call it a procedure mask, per the letter of the regulation, that could be a class 1 device, so you could go ahead and start selling it almost immediately. Did that make sense? Whoever asked the question. It's gray. I can lead you through it. I can walk you through it, and I can talk to your client to make sure that they understand what they're doing and that they're comfortable with whatever it is they finally decide. If you have any other questions, call me on that particular topic. What else we got?
Hey, Darren, there is a initiative they called the 100 million masks or something that was sent out or kicked off today by the American Hospital Association. And so their challenge is for crafters or anybody, you know, who has 7 seamstresses or whatever, to work with their local hospitals. And some of them may have a drop box for those. If you're donating them, is it sort of they use them at their own risk?
That's exactly right. Yep. And as you said, and as we talked about earlier, that's really going at the local level. So the FDA is not going to enforce anything there. And the hospital chain has asked that to be done so that everybody that's doing it is doing it on behalf of the hospital. So the rules kind of change.
And just for everybody's, to help, I've been in touch today with the government affairs or government assistance person at the Virginia Healthcare and Hospital Association. I might have said that backwards, but she's going to help figure out which hospitals need what. And so as I gather that, I'll share that as well. There's some other questions coming up, Kelly.
All right. There is one of the questions.
Okay. It depends on what PPE you're talking about. If they're class 1 devices, it really, I would have to see a sample of it, and if it comes in fine, then it's going to be good to go. If it's a class 2 device, yeah, the plastic shields are class 1. That is correct. And so those are not going to be a whole lot of vetting because the government really doesn't control those at this point. If you're trying to see if they're manufactured in a registered facility, which they may or may not be at this point, but you can go online, the same tabs that I was talking about earlier on the FDA's website, again, fda.gov, you can go there and find out if the facility is registered with the FDA. A word of caution, all that means is that they're registered with the FDA. It means nothing about what they have in place currently. They've just registered. By the way, if a company says, well, we just registered with the FDA, they don't update their databases, but about I think at the first of each month, at the end of each month. So if somebody registers with the FDA today, it may not show up in the database until the end of next month. That doesn't mean they can't give you proof. If you ask them, hey, is this a FDA registered facility? They can go into their portal and print off the fact that they are actually registered with the FDA. If it is a class 2 device, you can ask if it's got a 510K. That would tell you they've gone through all the process that they need to go through. If it's a reputable company and they didn't just start up, then they should have a 510K for the class 2 devices.
Hey, Darren, this is Bill. You might want to, for masks, N95 masks, CDC site's got a list of all the approved manufacturers for sale in the United States, both NIOSH and NIOSH upgraded for surgical use. And we can get that document up to Kelly for distribution as well.
Okay, what else we got?
I think that covers it from the chat end.
Great. Kelly, could you get me that list of questions and I'll type up responses and we'll start using that as the basis to develop the question and answers?
Absolutely.
Okay, guys. Well, that's it. I appreciate you guys' time. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Aimee. And if it's a quick question, you can email or call me and we can help answer some questions. If you need something walked through real quick, we can do that for you as well. I hope this was beneficial to everyone, and go out there and get them, guys. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Aimee. And thanks, Kelly, for hosting this. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. This will be on MEPU by tomorrow.
Perfect.
Kelly, I'll send you the final draft.
Okay, that sounds
Hey,
great.
Darren, there's one more question about sterilization.
Okay.
Do masks require sterilization and packaging requirements to maintain sterilization?
No, the procedure masks and the masks everybody's using do not require sterilization. If they're actually going to be used in the OR, then you'll have the sterile masks sometimes. And a lot of times, if you're selling it to a kit packer, they will place it into a tray, so they will sterilize it. But no, the masks do not require to be sterilized.
All right. Well, I think that concludes the meeting. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the webinar portion.
Great. Sounds good, guys. Good luck.
Thank you.